Welcome back. The professor is in. President Trump still has his sights set on fixing July's lackluster jobs report, which prompted him to fire the Bureau of Labor Statistics commissioner. Well, yesterday, the president presented more favorable, unverified data from the Conservative Heritage Foundation. And here's part of his exchange with that foundation's economist, Stephen Moore.
This shows that over the last 2 years of the Biden administration, the BLS overestimated job creation by 1.5 million jobs. That's Mr. President, that's a gigantic error. And I don't know if I'm not
making it. Might not have been an error. I think they did it purposely.
But the president cannot choose the data that informs our economy. Even though the Bureau of Labor Statistics is part of the government, it is still politically independent, and the Heritage Foundation is not. To help us understand, the professor is in. Joining us now is University of Michigan economics and public policy professor Justin Wolfers. Okay, so Justin, we get a lot of independent analysis of our economy from financial institutions, even from universities like yours, right? So why does the government even need to provide this kind of information?
It's a really good question, Anna, and it's because data is fundamentally different than most other goods in the economy. So most stuff that you buy, we call them private goods, they're excludable. What that means is that if someone, for instance, wants to get entry into my gym, I can prevent them from using my product, my gym, unless they pay for a gym membership. But if you look up data, say the latest unemployment rate, I can't stop you from sharing that with your mate. And as a result, your mate's not going to buy it, and that means there'll be less demand for it. The other thing about data is it's what's called non-rival. So normally, say, a normal good like a cookie, if you take a bite of a cookie, that's one less bite for someone else. But with data, if you get to use the data, it doesn't hurt anyone else. And so because of all of this, markets don't produce enough data. Look, let me put it in more simple terms. We all benefit from economic data, and so it makes most sense if we all just pitch in to help pay for it, and that's why we have the government collect it for all of us.
So just how important is it then in terms of how this data is ultimately used in making decisions?
Look, big picture, it informs everything that the government does. The government has trillions of dollars, and they need to figure out where to build roads and where to build schools and hospitals and who needs help with unemployment insurance and health insurance and so on. But it's not just the government that uses it. Businesses use it as well. If you want to figure out which cities you need to go to find skilled workers, if you're trying to figure out what part of the country to open a new business in, or if you're unemployed right now and you want to figure out which are the hot new industries where I can search for a job, you're going to rely on government data to inform those decisions.
So the government, businesses, individual people use this data, but the data isn't always entirely accurate. So why is it so hard for it to be precise?
Look, data's like people, and nothing's ever perfect. And nothing's perfect here because there's trade-offs. You can choose, there's a trade-off between data can be perfectly accurate, timely, or cheap. But you can't be all three at the same time. And so, for instance, the big kerfuffle last week was that the Bureau of Labor Statistics releases incomplete data as it comes to hand because it wants to be as timely as possible. Later on, more data comes to hand, and then it becomes more accurate. And so, therefore, it has to revise its data. Now, of course, the president is upset that the data is not always exactly perfect. And they're not perfect because we don't collect data from every business in America. That would be prohibitively expensive. So it's always a trade-off between being a bit more accurate, a bit more timely, and a little bit cheaper.
Talk to us about the importance of keeping politics completely out of it when it comes to this data collection and dissemination.
Yeah, so think about it. You're trying to decide where to open a business, which state, which city. If I told you that the data was the best we could possibly get, then you would rely on that data and you'd make really smart and savvy business decisions. But if I told you that the data was correct half the time, but the other half the time the government had intervened and meddled because they wanted to try and tilt the playing field to have businesses open in their favorite state, for instance, then you wouldn't rely on it very much at all. So whenever the government adds politics to data, it makes the data less true, therefore less reliable, therefore less valuable. If what we're going to do is only release data that helps the government tell the story it wants, then the data itself probably isn't worth collecting and spending all that money on, because you're making it a whole lot less valuable. And this is also where it gets to democratic accountability. Think about government data as being like the key performance indicators for the CEO, being the president. If he or she were to only release data that make them look good, then how can we, the voters, make sure that we only re-elect competent people? How can we hold their feet to the fire? So we need to understand the truth in order to keep our lawmakers accountable.
Professor Justin Wolfers, as always, such great information. Thank you for helping to increase our understanding of this important matter.